Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at Sunrun, Omnicell, and TransDigm. But first, let's take a look at the major indexes. It's Alyssa Coram here, and I have a very special guest, our Deputy Markets Editor, David Chung. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Thank you, Allie. Great to be here again.
All right, and Dave is also the special guest on this week's Investing with IBD podcast, and we'll get into a preview of that a little bit later. But first, let's talk about what we saw today. The NASDAQ did finish slightly lower. The S&P 500 up about 0.4%. The NASDAQ up 0.7%, and the Russell 2000 gaining some 1.6% today. So small caps really leading today.
They led the show indeed, and that's a pleasant surprise going into the weekend. We know everyone's really focused on G20, but we wanted to focus on the Russell 2000 and specifically IWM. This is the ETF that tracks this small cap index. Very, very unusually big gain versus the Dow and the S&P. And if you notice on that daily chart, we're kind of trying to climb back above a key technical level. That's the 50-day moving average. So when we're in a market uptrend, we want to see as many indexes climb above that 50-day line. That would be bullish for stocks.
That it would. So we will be keeping an eye on that technical level for the Russell. But let's turn our attention to a few individual names. We want to take a look at TransDigm, and we won't give too much away because this was talked about in detail in the podcast this week, but a standout in the aerospace sector.
Exactement. That's French for exactly. And the reason I mentioned that is that I actually really make a fool of myself with some French in the podcast, but we had a great time. This is one of the three stocks we talked about in depth, but it also happens to be a leaderboard stock, which means that it's one of the true growth leaders so far in 2019. Had a very successful breakout earlier this year, and now it's recently broken out past a new buy point, 490.05. It's fiddling around the current buy point, but no sell signals have been triggered, and it has a lot of strong fundamental as well as technical characteristics. I do want to point out a strong 97 composite rating, and it's also a play into this long-term secular trend of airline travel, and more people want to travel as well. There's the aerospace, the defense component too.
Yeah, that's right. And like a few other names that we've analyzed as of late, even though it is pulling back near that buy zone, the volume on the downside hasn't been overwhelming. So it's a somewhat gentle pullback, not a violent pullback.
That's right. That's the usefulness of daily charts. It had a nice breakout and heavy volume, and if you see pullbacks to that pivot point or that buy point, look to see the volume kind of shrink or decrease versus the prior updates.
Right.
That's a good sign.
And those pullbacks to the buy points aren't unusual by any means, so investors should be aware of that when they're looking to buy.
That little trend is a little more notable in the past week. As you know, we've seen some pullbacks in software stocks and other leading stocks, some increased jitters about what President Trump and President Xi will talk about this Saturday in Osaka.
Yes, indeed. All eyes on that. And let's quickly touch on a few more names here. We have Sunrun, some interesting action here for a solar play. And I think the interesting thing here, Dave, is that this solar group is really coming back into the spotlight, or the sunlight, I guess you could say.
Totally in the sunlight. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Spotlight, whatever you want to call it. Number one in our daily rankings of 197 industry groups. And this stock is probably not so well known as some of the others that have led the group, but according to our tech writer Brian Deegan, who just wrote about this in IBD Stock of the Day, that it is the leading company in solar installation services and is riding another big secular trend. So we find that it's very compelling because of the chart action. Earnings likely could turn around. We might see
explosive growth expected.
Triple-digit earnings growth expected in the current quarter. But actually, over the past 3 years, sales have actually grown 28%. So it's got some decent fundamentals. Watch for it as a potential turnaround.
All right, we will be watching that. And last but not least, Omnicell is on our radar. This one too pulled back near a buy point, but a little bit of a rebound today, up almost 3% in above average turnover.
It's a very interesting stock because they're trying to automate pharmacies. obviously healthcare, drug pricing, all of those things related to reimbursement, Medicare, big issues going on right now. We're in the middle of presidential debates for the Democratic National nominee, and so it's a hot topic. But this stock is showing some unusual strength. Here again, testing that recent buy point. My colleague Terry Jones wrote about Omnicell in Stock Spotlight. You can read all about it at investors.com.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have to do that. And you'll also have to check out investors.com/podcast for the latest episode of our Investing with IBD show. It is out now. Dave, give us a little bit of a preview here. What should investors be expecting when they listen to this episode?
Well, this episode is divided into three parts, briefly about the stock market and some of the current leaders. We'll also try to discuss the issue of what is news. What kind of news can really help you make headway with your portfolio in growth stocks? And finally, I actually share a kind of a humorous but very educational story regarding Bill O'Neill, our founder, and tennis.
Well, some fantastic tips and stories there. Don't miss it. Again, check out investors.com/podcast for the show and to subscribe and listen on your favorite listening platform of choice. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us today, and we will see you right back here tomorrow to cap off the week.
Thank you.